It is much easier actually to just be fully out and be like, all right, deal with it. I'm bisexual. I'm polyamorous. I have a few partners. If you have a problem with that, there's going to be a boundary that I have to set, and I might have to distance myself from you if you have a problem with that. Like, I'm just going to be upfront so I don't have to lie, so you don't have to feel lied to.
Welcome back to Open Late Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Spandiari, and this week I have with me Michelle High, who is a non-monogamy and polyamorous content creator. She goes by Polyamorous while Asian, which I think is so fun and cheeky, and she is in the US as well, in Portland. So yeah, welcome to the show, Michelle.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's been I've been following you for some time, so it's kind of wild that it took me this long to reach out because I feel like when you start a podcast in non-monogamy, you're like, all of your favorite content creators you want to have on. And then I was like, okay, I should have some of my friends on because I think that's a cool aspect to ask people what it's like to be friends with someone or, a couple who's non-monogamous. And now I'm diving back into other, content creators and also people who do peer support, which you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the education that you provide just on Instagram is very, very valuable.
Thank you. Yeah.
I would love to start with letting us get to know you because this is the
hmm
first time we've met as well. And I'm sure people listening are like, okay, what's your story? When did you first realize that monogamy was not going to be a good fit for you?
Mm-hmm. It was a pretty gradual journey. When I was young, my parents divorced, and so I think that planted a sort of seed. Though I think throughout my, childhood and teenage years, I was still on the monogamy train. But there were always like this nagging thoughts in the back of my head, watching movies or shows that were romantic, or especially if they had a quote unquote love triangle, which is more like a love hinge, um, where one person has to choose between two people, and for all intents and purposes, maybe the two people are about equal, but then they have to like give one of them like a fatal flaw or something. um, but yeah, in my head, I was thinking, aren't adults capable of sharing? Is that a
Yeah.
thing? Is that a
Isn't
thing
this?
they do?
Yeah.
Can
Don't
they
we teach kids this?
right, like, can they talk about it? Is that a thing people do? But yeah, I did not encounter the terms polyamory or non-monogamy until I was, like, a freshman in college. I was, like, 18. The book Sex at Dawn had come out pretty recently, and when I met my first partner, my ex, he is the one who recommended that I read that book. And this is a very much a red flag. At the time, it was very much a trying to hint at the fact that he wants to do a non-monogamy thing without explicitly I think he wanted to gauge my reaction to the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when I read it, a lot of it made sense. A lot of it was like, yeah, it's I don't think I've ever been able to turn back since then. Um, but yeah, so I was about 18 and, yeah, I've technically never been in a monogamous relationship. Only
Wow.
yeah, it's weird. It's weird to think about. Yeah,
This
I'm
is really
29
rare.
now. Yeah. Yeah, 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 and part of it was because I was just, like, a pretty shy and awkward teenager. Like, I'm a shy and awkward adult, but I was a very shy, awkward teenager, wasn't kissing anybody or anything. So so yeah, I didn't start dating until that partner in college. Mhm.
Wow. Well, thanks to that guy. Oh,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
partner. I
yeah,
just assumed. Oh, no, you did
yeah.
say it was a guy.
Mhm, yeah, well, yeah, thanks to that guy for that, and that's
Mhm.
about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's usually the way it goes.
Uh-huh.
Wow, that's so cool. So I didn't realize that I mean, of course, you had a lot of monogamous upbringing kind of programming and cultural programming to unwind a bit, but you weren't ever practicing monogamy. So I
No, not
imagine,
actively, yeah.
yeah, that it might
I
have
was a
been.
dweeb.
That's okay. I don't even think 18 is that late of a
No,
bloomer.
I don't think so either, and I mean, I don't believe in, like, "Oh, you gotta do it," like, if you're in your early 20s and you haven't, had sex or anything yet, shame on you. I don't know, it's all so silly.
Right.
But
It's
yeah.
just all relative.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
You were probably doing other really cool things that then people don't get to till later. And they're like, "Oh, I didn't have a childhood."
Oh, man. Yeah, yeah,
Is it
I had a fun upbringing, like, I had grandparents who would take my sister and I, road tripping most summers, so I've seen, like, uh, a great deal of the United States. We even drove up and down to, like, Alaska one time with, like, a truck
Wow.
and a fifth wheel, like, it was wild on the Alcan,
That's
yeah.
so cool.
It's very cool. I'm so glad that I had that experience when I was, like, 13? Yeah. Anyway, I
Yeah.
was doing that. I wasn't having sex or anything.
Awesome. Good for you. I'm hearing sex at dawn. It's so funny because I feel like for a lot of us, that's our first sort of,
Mhm.
I think the first time I ever really like found out who Aubrey Marcus was, because that was my introduction to like, oh, this is a thing.
Mhm.
I would kind of started having threesomes with my husband before we were even married. And it was a kind of an accidental thing. I say kind of because he says we were talking about it in the bedroom, just the two of us,
Mm.
like women. He
Mhm.
was kind of doing that thing that you're actually like
Mhm.
planting the seed.
Mm.
And I think seeing how I would respond, but he noticed an attraction that I had with a friend and he called me out on it. And so that was my first sex at dawn was the first thing I read as well.
Mhm.
So I know that a lot of people listening who listen to my show have heard about this before, Chris Ryan's book. And since then there have been not many, but a decent amount of resources and things that have been written and content creators. But I don't know how long ago 18 was for you. So I don't know how old you are.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm
But
29. I'm 29, so it
okay.
was, like, a little
So a
over 10
decade.
years ago, which is
Yeah.
so wild to think about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have a very similar timeline then.
Mm.
My journey into this has been about a decade as well.
Nice.
So my next question is, did you find other resources readily available, or were you like, well, I've got to go create some resources?
So at the time when I was first starting, I don't think I was seeking out a whole lot of resources. At the time, I feel like the big three for a while was Sex at Dawn was the newcomer, but More Than Two and of course the Ethical Slut were the classics.
Mm,
These days, like I think there's probably a lot that's outdated with More Than Two. Not to mention that like uh, Franklin Vo is probably not a good guy. So I don't recommend that book anymore. But I think it is important to knowledge acknowledge that More Than Two was one of the major resources for a long time. But yeah, Ethical Slut, like they even came out with an updated version. That one still, I think, mostly holds up.
hmm.
And I haven't revisited Sex at Dawn since I first read it, so I don't know what my opinion would be of it today. Um, but it was important for my non-monogamy journey. Yeah.
Mm. Now, were you like blowing open the minds of friends, family, community? Did you keep it quiet in the beginning and explore on your own? Or were you finding that other people that you were talking to were interested in this as well? Or
So I
was it
don't
a
tend to
mix?
be, yeah, like I think the way that I do life, I don't tend to be particularly outgoing or explosive about anything. And I think especially since I was 18, I was still living at home and there was just like there was so much drama. I think like I never had like a rebellious teenage phase. I think I saved that up for college. Um but yeah, the only person in my family that I'm fully out to is my sister because we're super close. We know too much about each other. And with friends, yeah, friends are aware of that. It was one of those things that it was just very gradual. Um, and I don't feel, I don't think I've ever really felt the need to come out about it because it just isn't particularly relevant to a lot of other parts of
Mm,
my life. Um, and yeah, to this day, like I still don't feel called to come out necessarily because it's interesting because a lot of my relationships just don't come up. Yeah. It's
interesting.
mhm.
So you're
Yeah.
not bringing multiple partners home for the holidays.
No, I actually like to compartmentalize that. Where it's like I think I just it's semi a joke, but at the same time, it is very real that I just don't wanna subject partners to, like, my parents.
Mm,
They are they are conservative, and it's just I have a tenuous relationship with them as well, and, fortunately, the, like, long-term partners I have are also in similar boats, and so none of us particularly value the meeting the parents thing all that much.
mm,
So it hasn't ever been a problem. We all
yeah.
understand, and we all just like, I don't know, as long as we just keep valuing and supporting each other, that's good enough for us. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I love this perspective. Can you share a bit more about what you feel like the pros are and what the ease that it creates in your life to compartmentalize, and then also if there are any cons, because
Mhm.
I know so many people, and we have kind of a peer support chat group as well, who get really stuck in the um, I'm terrified to come out to my family. I'm afraid people at work are going to find out. And here you are with like a very public online platform. And I gather it's because like your parents are not on social media. So that creates a nice little
Um,
barrier, or maybe
yeah.
they are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but how do you navigate that? And, it sounds like you found a lot of ease in being able to keep things in their own lane.
Mhm.
I wonder if there are, more upsides you can speak to, and then if you ever feel any downsides.
Oh, yeah, there are lists of pros and cons. And I think this is a very personal decision for everyone. Because, of course, it is more difficult for some people to compartmentalize where just logistically. For me, I think over the years, because I'm the eldest child, so I was the first one that my parents had to do a lot of oh, we have a child that's like becoming an adult now. Um, so so because of my family's poor communication styles, we basically developed a don't ask, don't tell thing. And I have often suspected that I think like my mother very intentionally doesn't ask me about my life very much because we all know it would be an uncomfortable topic. Um, and but that works fine for me. My values are very different from my parents, and so it just doesn't make sense to me to connect with them that much in that way. To have to provide the education, the scaffolding to be like, okay, first of all, I'm not straight. I'm bisexual.
Mhm.
Uh, sit with that. You
Yeah.
you probably have a lot of, incorrect notions and misconceptions.
Yeah,
We're
I'll come
not
back in
gonna
a year.
Right, we're not gonna touch on that right now, I'm too tired. But I'm also polyamorous, probably have a lot of, uh, misconceptions about that as well. We're not gonna go into that too deep. But yeah, so I'm part of it is I'm kind of lazy. I don't really wanna do that work with my family at this point in my life. I'm at the it's almost like a fuck around and find out thing with how public, my Instagram is and website and whatever. Because like, yeah, if you just Google my name, my website, it's like one of the first things that pops up. And,
Mm,
I did block my mother on Instagram. But if she were to find out about it any other way, and if she wanted to ask me about it directly, yeah, all right, we'll talk about it. But I'm just
yeah.
not interested in pushing that matter.
Mhm.
Yeah, so like pros and cons, like pros, I don't have to talk about it with them. Cons is sometimes there's like the whole every once in a while they'll ask a personal life question. I'll be like, "Oh, I'm just, doing my thing, living alone, you know, same old, same old." There is a little bit of having to hide myself a bit. But for me, it doesn't feel too strenuous. It doesn't feel especially inauthentic to myself. Um, Also, I'm in a place where I can be public because what are my parents going to do? Cut me off financially, kick me out? There are no consequences in that case. For some
Mhm.
people, that's just not an option. Some people still are dependent on a lot of family support and stuff like that, and like could even put themselves in dangerous situations if they were to come out in certain ways. So yeah, the coming out thing is very personal, and I don't think it should be equated with validity in one's sexual or relationship orientation. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you for sharing. I think, this is such a beautiful perspective. And I don't think we've ever had anyone talk about it in this way of, not being fully out to
Hmm.
family and like that part of the community, but while being so out and being open and like, okay, if they find out, great, but I'm not going to bring this information to them. And like, I think what a healthy boundary that you've
Mm.
set. Like,
It brings me
in
a lot of peace, that's for sure.
Yes. I'm over here like, I put that scaffolding on my back and brought it to my parents' house and set it up in front
Mhm.
of, their row home in Philadelphia and was like, "Here we go." Which
Yeah.
it it's a great reflection is I'm sitting here learning because I've being the oldest in my family,
Mm.
I have 4 younger brothers and sisters. I've always, like, took on the role of educator, and
Mm.
it's an exhausting role, and I'm learning just now at, like, 38 how to unpack that and that I don't have to be that if I don't want to, and non-monogamy aside, there are many different facets of my life where I've felt like, "Oh, I don't wanna be misunderstood, so let me get out the whiteboard for everybody."
Right. Let's
And
get the flow
meanwhile
charts, the
yeah.
diagrams,
Yeah.
PowerPoint. Here we go.
I thank God for therapy because for the last 2
Mm.
years, I've really been unlearning that, like, people understanding me is not my responsibility, and it's been
Mm.
a really nice relief, and I'm still unlearning all this. But I really love just how simply you put it. It creates a lot of ease in your life and
Mhm.
peace. I think you said peace, so
Mhm.
thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that. For people listening, there's another way, not my way.
Yeah, and again, it's different for everyone. I've also
Yeah,
talked to people where it's like, it is much easier actually to just be fully out and be like, "All right, deal with it. I'm bisexual, I'm polyamorous, I have a few partners. If you have a problem with that, there's gonna be a boundary that I have to set, and I might have to distance myself from you if you have a problem with that.
right.
Otherwise, just so I don't
Mhm.
have to to, like, run circles in my, mind to try to create and craft stories, like,
Right.
I'm just gonna be upfront so I don't have to lie, so you don't have
Mhm.
to feel lied to. But also, if you're an asshole about it, boundaries are gonna, be enacted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It is beautiful how it's gonna work different for every single person.
Mhm.
And the amount of liberation that I found once I did come out and share, because it was very private for almost 5 full years, and
Mm.
the back 5 have been open and, yeah, it was a nice transition for me and one that was right and that I needed at that time. So, yeah, it really is. It shakes out exactly how it's supposed to.
Mm.
Um, I would love to ask you. So you chose the title polyamorous while Asian,
Mhm.
and what has that sort of what was the inception of centralizing being Asian in your experience, and how has that, I guess, developed? Because I do think it's so cultural, right? Like, and we all have these different perceptions. Sometimes people like when they hear about non-monogamy or polyamory from me and I have like a really big group of diverse friends, I'll get a lot of times from my friends, oh, that's white people shit. And I'm like, but actually, like, I don't think it is historically. I think,
Mhm.
that there are a lot of different ways to look at it. So what sort of does polyamorous while Asian mean to you,
Mhm.
and why was
Yeah.
that title?
Yeah, I mean, right, it is interesting, like, cause even I hear, like, the whole, like, "That's white people shit" kind of thing, because
Yeah.
that is, yeah, the, like, mainstream public, representation is mostly
Hmm.
white people, um, and they're mostly in triads and stuff. That's, like,
Yeah.
I think the most palatable version so far.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's really wild to think about because I created the account like February of 2020.
Hmm.
Um, like little did we know
Yeah.
what was what was on the horizon.
The dawn of a new era.
Oh my god, yeah, an era that just yeah. Ugh. Um, but right, so February 2020. Um, I think I was just looking for a personal outlet, creating just another Instagram, like, expecting it to maybe just be like a Finsta, just kind of like a secondary Instagram where I'll just put maybe more explicit thoughts or rant about stuff, and not necessarily seeking to become like a hashtag influencer type. um, but yeah, I was like, rambling about stuff, and came to the realization that because of the place in my life, I feel like I can be publicly out without a lot of repercussions. So far, fingers crossed. And yeah, so like I've followed like polyamorous black girl, Alicia, for a
Mhm.
few years. There's like Love's Not Colorblind by Kevin Patterson,
Mm.
and like these are two very excellent voices who are not white, and they talk about uh white supremacy and political aspects of relationships and non-monogamy and whatnot. And these were some of the only places where I was, seeing that for a long time.
Mm.
And then I was curious, like, oh, what kind of like polyamorous like Asian representation is out there? And it was hard to find any. And I was like, I know we're
Yeah.
out there, and I understand why. Like a lot of us, I feel like we can't be particularly public. And then because it was February 2020 and then it turned into March 2020, I found myself just being at home a lot.
Yeah.
That became my pandemic hobby. I did not take up baking. I did not create a sourdough starter. I didn't take up knitting or anything. I did watch Tiger King, but my pandemic hobby
Oh, dear.
became Instagram. And yeah, that was basically the inception of this account. And yeah, I take it a day at a time. And um especially in the first couple years, I think I uh it was more like hobby slash work. And then in the past year or so, I've slowed down a bit because I didn't want it to be work.
Mm.
And I wanted to be just a lot more laid back about it. And because I've always told myself that whenever it stops being fun or enjoyable, then hopefully I'll have the wherewithal to just stop.
Yeah. Do you take breaks? I know as like a content creator, I've had to just delete Instagram from my phone for like a month and like
Mm,
recalibrate or,
mhm.
however long that is.
Yeah.
Do you like do that for yourself?
So I haven't done like a full on like delete the app kind of break. It sounds healthy though, but my little brain wants those little dopamine hits. But mostly these days I mostly exist just like in my IG stories as opposed to like creating
Mhm.
posts and stuff. And it's like, yeah, people get pictures of my cats, and every once in a while I'll talk about, like yesterday I got, a SDI checkup, and so I'll post about that, or I'll talk about a little sexual exploit or something, a little story time. But mostly I just kind of like goof off in my stories, and
Yeah.
that feels just so much more sustainable. And then every
Yeah.
every so often, if there is something, a topic that I do feel like I really want to talk about, all right, that'll go into the feed.
Right. That's so smart. Yeah. Having a podcast means that we've got to be on there pretty regularly
Mm,
to share
mhm.
every guest and every episode. And
Right.
um, it does feel more sustainable now because it's the only thing I'm doing.
Mm.
But that just became my reality in December. I had to shut down all of my other work and yeah, so
Wow.
it's interesting to just focus on this and grow the podcast, but it is the thing in my life that I felt like needed the most attention in a
Mm.
community that really needs the education and to see more healthy representations of non-monogamy and people that are helping lay these foundations. It's weird to think that that's what I'm doing now it's not work that makes me any money, but it feels like the best thing that I can be doing with my time,
Mm. Mhm.
based on the, reactions and responses of
Yeah, that's
the
great.
listeners. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's interesting. If you would have told me last year, like, this is what you're going to be focusing on, I'd been like, no, this is this
What?
niche thing that I do.
Mhm.
But I'm really glad you brought up your last post because I saw that too. And it's one of the reasons that I wanted to chat with you. One of the things that you educate on a lot is, or chat with you about, I don't think I said that, is sexual health
Mm.
and normalizing sexual health conversations, being public about them. and breaking the stigma around STIs. So, how did that become something that you're really interested in and want to share about?
Yeah, I mean, I think again this was a part of like gradual journey along with non-monogamy, and I think just like I feel like I started a lot of that at 18, and just a lot of like figuring out early adulthood, um,
Mhm.
and like I think even as a teenager, in addition to like the teen hormones and everything, I was always interested in sex. Sex was always an interesting topic, and of course, it's so taboo, which makes it extra interesting and whatever.
Yeah.
Then as an adult, gradually being able to explore more, just finally explicitizing to myself in my mid-20s that I'm bisexual, which was like a duh, Michelle. Um, but yeah, like feeling more freedom within non-monogamy, with my relationships and exploring myself. Um, yeah, just sex just becomes a very comfortable topic for me. It feels not very shameful to talk about for me. Like not that I'm like screaming about sex all the time, no matter the context. Like I still understand there are places where probably not appropriate or I'm not
Right.
going to get a good reaction. But love talking about sex, and, like, I've had STIs, like, being a sexually active person, there's always that risk, and,
Mhm.
yeah, I've had, like, chlamydia, gonorrhea, and I remember, in health classes, right, they, like, try to scare the shit out of you. It's almost like that Mean Girls clip where it's like,
Yeah.
"If you have sex, you will die. If
Yeah.
you have sex, you'll catch all of these diseases, and
Mhm.
these are the sores, and this is what it looks like," even though so many of them, are present with no symptoms.
Right.
Um, yeah,
The
but yeah.
majority of them actually,
Exactly,
I feel like.
exactly.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, first time I got chlamydia, I was like, "Oh my god, I feel so bad." And, because I also, like, accidentally gave it to a partner because, yeah, asymptomatic, and I was between, like,
Mhm.
testings. Um, and so, yeah, I just felt so terrible, and I was like, "Oh my god, is this the end of our relationship?" Or whatever. And then he was
Yeah.
very cool about it, very chill, and we just, rediscussed of, like, oh, what can we do to help prevent this in the future?
Mhm.
Also knowing that there is no 100% prevention except for abstinence, but we're not gonna fucking do that.
Right.
But yeah, so after that, I'm like, oh, I just took like antibiotics for like a week, 10 days or something like that, and then it was gone, and that was it.
Mhm.
Um, Same thing, like, uh, yeah, like with gonorrhea, very quick and easy, painless treatment.
Yeah.
The annoying part and the sometimes embarrassing part is they're like, "All right, I gotta look back at my calendar and like text a few people."
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I've never had like a really bad reaction.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm,
And that's the thing because the lack of sex ed that we receive
mhm,
leaves people believing you're gonna be very sick or it's something you can never get rid of,
mhm.
and to your point, it's like having a sinus infection. I mean, you might even not feel crappy or have symptoms
Mhm.
actually, but you're
Mhm.
walking around contagious, and all it takes is like a course of antibiotics usually
Right.
for most things.
Mhm.
Or for things that do stay in your system, it's like, you have it, but it might present itself like once a year.
Right, yeah,
But
like
that's, yeah,
the
so
like, they're
yeah.
all treatable, or manageable. Right. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Mhm.
But the taboo of sex really not only leaves people in the dark from an education standpoint, but it makes it uncomfortable to even want to educate yourself, I think, for people who grow
Mhm.
up with a lot of shame. At least like that was my experience.
Mm.
I really knew nothing about STDs at all until this was my world. And I was like,
Mm.
better educate myself quick. Um, yeah, so I just appreciate that that's part of your content for people, and I know that it's shining a light on that. It's like a lighthouse, and people are really hungry for this information
Mm.
because there's not like I think a school in America, at least in like middle
Oh
school or high
god.
school ages,
Yeah.
that's really doing it right. We have all these supplemental things. That's actually what I wanted to ask you. What are your favorite resources or if you've created any, or that you can point people to who want more information about, like, here are the facts
Mm.
when it comes to sex ed. Like, I always point people in the direction of Anne Hondership because I feel like she's the queen of sex ed in a lot of
Mm.
ways, and
Mhm.
she's created a lot of very easy to digest, like, pieces of content, and also she has, like, her training.
Mm.
um
Mhm.
but were you like, I'm just going to Google it, or did you find certain people that you really loved and resonated with?
I mean, I think over the years, I think it's been a combination of, every once in a while looking at, say, like CDC guidelines,
Mhm.
which don't always feel like common sense. I don't know. There's some where it's like, oh, maybe just get tested once a year or something. And I'm like, or like once in your lifetime, maybe do this. And like,
More like once a month
right. Once a month.
after the monthly
Yeah.
orgy.
Right. But yeah, so starting with things like CDC guideline or even like the World Health Organization, looking at statistics and things like that. Like in December, like I officially got like a herpes diagnosis because I got like a cold sore on my mouth. And I was like, oh, like okay, I guess it was finally like it was like it was almost like a matter of when, not if, because
Yeah.
like I mean I think in the United States alone, it's like more than half of people have it, and most people don't know. So I'm like, oh, finally I can like get on some Valtrex and take some daily antivirals, and
Mhm.
yeah. But right, some resources. Oh god, I'm always like really bad at like remembering names and things like that. But I like
I'm the same way, so
oh
sorry I put
god,
you on
I
the
know.
spot, because
So
if you
I
ask me, I'd be like,
know. Yeah, it's like, "Oh, come back to me later." But, like, off the top of my head, like, on Instagram, because I mostly live on Instagram, like, sex education is really good, safe dot slut, like, is really good, like, she, specifically talks about, herpes, but also is really good at destigmatizing, like, STIs and STI tests and,
yeah.
reclaiming, or yeah, just destigmatizing a lot and trying to and I also like the spin of like, just like the I don't know, the reclaiming sluttiness in a way as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
It's always very fun.
I just reshared
Mhm.
her post from today, this morning. It
Yeah,
was
it's
like
great. Yeah, I love the
like
I love the vibe. I love the energy.
mhm.
Because right, it isn't not to completely minimize because like sometimes having an STI can lead to complications and things like that. So not to say that like they're absolutely harmless, but they're not. They shouldn't be as demonized as it is, and it shouldn't be tied into morality where it's like there's if you catch an STI, you're like so dirty because it's attached to
Yeah.
sex, which is so dirty and wrong and you're not supposed to enjoy it. All of those things, all of the
Mhm.
crap that's associated with that. Um, but yeah, those are the 2 off the top of my head, and I know also, like, queer sex therapy, like, I mean, they cover
Oh,
so
yeah.
so many things, but, yeah, they, cover sexual
So
health as
good.
well. Mhm.
Yeah. Are they in Portland too? Queer
No,
sex
they're not in
therapy? Who am I
Portland.
thinking of? Oh, I don't know.
Mhm,
Anyway, they're great as well.
mhm,
Um, Thank you for sharing. I'll link all that in the show notes so that people can go find all those content creators along with all of um, your links and places for people to find your work and your peer support group. I think the last thing that I really want to know, and I think that people listening are always curious about, is what does your polyamorous life look like at this stage, at this point? What's your practice? Do you have multiple partners? I have a very specific dynamic and I'm married. And so people see that and they see us date other people.
mhm,
Um, what are you, and how do you identify, like, you solo poly, relationship anarchy? And if you don't box yourself into anything, I love that too.
mhm.
What does, a day in the life of Michelle or a week look like?
Yeah, gosh, it really can depend week by week. Some weeks I'm just like, I'm just at home snacking on popcorn, binging shows, and another week I'm like out every night. But so in general, like I do like to talk about labels in that like language is inherently metaphorical, and so any words that we come up with as granular as we can get are still just approximations of our existence, experience, life. Um, but yeah, I guess the labels that fit me most, that I think would be the most descriptive, are I fall under solo polyamorous at this time in my life. Um, for me, that means I don't live with my partners, and I don't necessarily share like financial logistical things with them, which doesn't mean that I'm like opposed to like supporting them or whatever, or in all these other ways. But it's like we don't pay bills together.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like that's a lot of the time, that's like the basic solo polyamory definition. Like it's like most non-monogamy definitions, there's some wiggle room because like we're all we're all just figuring this out. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I often say that I'm solo polyamorous with like relationship anarchy leanings. I think like I haven't done enough reading. It's almost funny to say, but it's like I don't think I've done enough of the like almost political academic work to fully call myself a relationship anarchist, because I do think it
Mm.
is a very political position, and that when people call themselves that, I think not everyone, but there's some people who I think fail to acknowledge um, that it is a very political set of practices and ideologies.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I prefer, for me, non-hierarchical, which means that like respecting people's autonomy and agency, having like treating each dynamic as its own thing, its own specific thing with its own specific boundaries and needs. Um, and like like if that qualifies me as a relationship anarchist, then so be it. But I'm not attached to it. I'm not opposed to it. And, yeah, I think those are the main labels with regard to my non-monogamy. Like I have, um it's always hard to quantify because I think over the years I've blurred lines between like romantic and sexual and platonic and, like
Mm.
what counts as like a what counts, right?
Yeah.
How like comets, long term, even though longevity doesn't necessarily equate to meaningfulness. Um, so I would say I have 3 to 4 like more long-term, more consistent partners that I see. And then there's just, I don't know, everyone's just part of the cloud, and
Mhm.
there are friends that I have sex with, there are friends that I don't have sex with. They're all part of the cloud.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's hard to quantify, and I almost don't like to quantify it because I think sometimes that people are asking for a hierarchy. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, yeah, still to this day don't really know how to describe it. I've joked with partners that it's like it's all just part of the meat cloud, It's its own little
Yeah.
ecosystem.
I love that. I really appreciate you sharing that. I think I think I have a lot of listeners too who are new to this, and when you're just learning, if you're listening to this and you a lot of times and people write in and ask like they want to grasp onto something that they
Mm.
could learn that feels concrete that you can build on. And it's like the longer you actually practice, I think, the more cloud like and
Yeah,
just
the
like
less concrete.
non-concrete things become.
Mhm.
Because yeah, I mean, I my whole last year of non-monogamy has looked really interesting. I have like I'm married, a husband, we're getting ready to start a family. And then I have Lauren, who's my partner. We call each other life partner. And our relationship is pretty much fully transitioned away from a sexual relationship,
Mm.
but like we're still a little bit romantic and people are like how, and then but and like she's living with us right now, which is like the
Mm.
best. I've been joking like that we had to like fully stop any kind of relationship dynamic for her to get her to move in. And like now I'm in
Mm.
like ultimate
Yeah.
heaven
Now that the
with
pressure's
like
off. All right,
yeah,
roomie.
it's amazing.
Mhm.
And the rest of my experiences all last year that have been like sexual or non-monogamous have all been very like one night stand ish
Mm,
adjacent.
mm.
And that's like what makes me really full and happy at this moment.
Yeah.
So people are like, which might look like that dynamic that people see a lot, like one man, two women. And, um, but I was like, I got to tell people about my kinkier side. I don't often talk about like my sex life on the show. And I just released an episode this week that was like,
Mm.
here are all the people that I've talked about.
Yeah,
Like,
year in review. Yeah, in the
yeah,
from the
like,
bedroom.
yeah, just to give people a glimpse. But yeah, no, I don't like to, it's hard to put labels on things that
Mhm.
you're open to them evolving and changing,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
Which is where, feels really good for me. But if the labels help you feel grounded in your
Mhm.
experience and help you grow forward, then amazing, use them. Um, that's what I tell people.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I agree. Labels can be very helpful. I mean, I'm not one of those people who's like, "Oh, I, like, absolutely hate labels." Like, "Oh, yeah, I still absolutely use labels," but I always feel like that's almost like a opener or, like, an introduction
Hmm.
to, like, oh, if, you wanna learn more, there's more depth to it, but, like, "Alright, here's the Reader's Digest version of it." Mhm. Too long, didn't
Yeah,
read.
exactly. Mhm. We actually made a quiz last year for people, and it's very, like, basic.
Mm.
Here are the multiple choice questions, and it'll basically, at the end of 13 questions, 5 minutes, it'll tell you, like, where you lean towards.
Mm.
Um, and like after I made it, I'm like, is this helpful? Actually, don't know if I want to release it because I don't want people to like box them in.
Mm.
So oftentimes, like I share it with this big disclaimer of like, please retake the quiz every 6 months because like you will maybe be somewhere entirely different and that's okay. But I
Mhm.
think for people just starting out, it's helpful to know the difference between things and realize that there's many different ways to practice because I think when you just scratch the surface, you think like it's this like non-monogamy means we're going to both have sex with other people and that's
Mhm.
just maybe not even the case, right? So it
Yeah.
can look so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because I mean, like, right, even having all those misgivings around monogamy growing up, like, I never had a word for it. And it's not like I
Mhm.
didn't have those thoughts, but those thoughts weren't cohesive and they couldn't fall under a certain category and they couldn't really fall into place. But finally, reading Sex at Dawn, learning about, like, oh, this is a thing that adults can do and have done for a long time, polyamory, non-monogamy, all these, like, non-traditional ways of relating, then finally, like, a lot of those thoughts were able to click into place over time. So yeah, absolutely, like, terms and labels can be a game changer. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, it's a nice chapter in the evolution, I think, of
Mhm.
relationships. And what you're saying makes me remember there was a point in this journey of opening up for me that I started to realize, and I think too with the podcast, like a lot of people who are monogamous are starting to listen or
Mm.
hear things that are resonating, and they might never open in the sense of how most people would consider opening their relationship, but they're starting to take certain aspects of, I think, non-monogamous principles
Mhm.
into their relationship, and it's totally creating a different kind of monogamy that's really fun to watch. So I'm like always encouraging, like I would love for monogamous people as well to see that their relationships can be so multidimensional,
Mhm. Mhm.
without ever opening. Maybe just like having these conversations where you could be more yourself and admit your desires and share with your partner, you know, like desires or turn ons. And maybe you never even act on them, but this becomes a whole separate dynamic within your monogamy. And that, in some ways, I'm like, oh, maybe that's like my whole purpose because creating more, spice and connection and variety within like monogamous relationships feels really cool and I like a challenge. So
Yeah, that's great. No, I love that. I love that. I mean, right, I've often maintained and you'll hear so many non-monogamous people say where it's like, yeah, I mean, good non-monogamy practice most very often is just good relationship practice in general. And this doesn't mean,
mhm.
of course, that like non-monogamous people are automatically better and more progressive. I mean, there are a lot of people who are still absolutely messy and, could
Yeah.
probably do a bit more introspection and group work as well. But right, like good relationship practice is good relationship practice. Good communication is good communication. Boundary work, um, And right, and then the thing that like a non-monogamy can do is, like you were saying, expand just the idea of what relationships and connections can be. It doesn't always have to revolve around sex, but like what is the platonic versus the romantic? What is, different hierarchies or whatever? Like why am I structuring relationships the way that I structure them? Is it because I actually want to do it this way, or it's because this is the way I've been taught, this is the way that I'm being pushed or motivated to do by certain external forces? What are those forces that like I can actually control versus, what I have to live with? But yeah, just being aware of a lot of the systems around. I mean, like monogamous people could also very much benefit from being more aware of mononormativity. I think a lot of monogamous people could
Mhm.
be so much happier. Um, you know, uh, Even escaping mononormativity. Like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, realizing the boxes that we're in that we don't even realize that
Mm-hmm.
we're just like born into is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Not only in relationships, but like in, cultural dynamics and things like that. And that really helps across the board. I appreciate you so much, your time and you sharing your insights. What's your favorite way to work with people?
Favorite way to work with people. So I like being able to just chat with people via Instagram. And then early on I set a boundary where it's like I do love chatting with people, even like deep personal conversations. But don't always have the bandwidth to go over paragraphs upon paragraphs just on
Yeah.
like in a little Instagram screen and trying to try to sift through your trauma with you. But
Mhm.
yeah, which is why I offer those support sessions where it's like, okay, one on one, or even, I'll talk with couples or whatever. Or even, sometimes more than that. But yeah, we can dedicate this space where we just talk about stuff together. Um and you can ask whatever questions. I won't judge. I'll share my perspective, my best practices. I'm no expert, but this is lived experience. Take what take what's relevant, leave what's not. Yeah, so like I think those are the two main ways I like to like connect with people with regard to like non-monogamy relationships and that.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Well, everyone listening, you can find Michelle at Polyamorous While Asian on Instagram. Definitely check out the peer support. And if you are interested in coaching, I highly recommend it. Because I'm not doing it right now. So hit up Michelle. No, I love it. Thank you again. And I would love to have you. I feel like we could dive into many, many topics, but I'm
Mm.
really glad that we covered what we did today with health. And yeah, just wishing you all the love and success and happiness for this new year.
Thank you. Likewise. Yeah, I mean, we're already a couple months in, but still a lot of 2023 left. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been really great chatting, and yeah, I would love to do it again.
Yeah, awesome. Well, have an amazing rest of your day. And to my listeners, of course, just take a moment to rate and review the podcast. If you can, screenshot me your review and send it to me, and I will send you a little gift. Love you all. Have a great day.